I've got something that I'd like to ask you. Do you have time for a question or two? Teachers, yeah. Home by 3 every day and 3 months off to spend your summers away. It's such an easy job, that's what they say. But I know better, that's not how it goes. My mother was a teacher, so if anyone knows, early mornings, long days, it's so much work for mediocre pay. Lesson plans, sponsoring clubs, grading papers, and finding subs. You're tutoring kids, you're coaching sports, you're dealing with problem students and parents of all sorts. I've got a question I'd like to ask you. Why in the world do you do what you do? When you're en route to Rock Eagle with a busload of kids, what am I doing here? When you're tying shoes and cleaning up messes over and over and again, oh, my back hurts, I'm too old for this. When you're in the middle of tech week and the lead role doesn't even know his lines, I wonder what my family's doing tonight. When you're on the field at band camp and every ounce of sweat has seeped from your moist, tired body. Yes, I said the word moist, ew. When you're running drills on the football field over and over and over and again, when you're grading papers and it's clear that it doesn't matter how hard you try, some students just don't care. I've got a question I'd like to ask you. Why in the world do you do what you do? Cover your mouth, cover your cough, cover your sneeze, and for goodness sake, young lady, cover your body. Stop talking, put away your phones, pay attention to the morning announcements, and for the love of all humanity, you're in the 4th grade. Have your parents not told you about deodorant? I've got a question I'd like to ask you. Why in the world do you do what you do? It's not easy changing schools in the middle of middle school. But fortunately, Maggie Jones knew that Grayson was new, and so she threw a pool party with pizza and invited 25 of her closest friends. The next morning, Grayson walked into Calhoun Middle School, a brand new 7th grader, but with 24 new acquaintances. She landed in Mr. Brookins' class where she was immediately reminded how much she enjoys math and the process of stretching her mind to solve complex problems. She landed in Sarah Farba's class where she was immediately reminded how much she loves reading and studying the classics. She landed in India Galleon's class where she was reminded how much she loves singing and being on stage. She landed in Madison Bunch's class where she was met with a teacher who treated her like a peer and a friend, not just another student. And over the next 5 years, she flourished beyond her parents' wildest dreams, all because of a cast of teachers that reads more like the starting lineup of an all-star game. Why in the world do you do what you do? Because you can do something that parents can't do, and because of students like my oldest daughter, Grayson. Campbell was excited to start 4th grade. She showed up for the open house and was given a brown paper bag. The instructions were to write on it, draw on it, decorate it however you want, but on the inside, place 3 objects that you're willing to share with the class so they can get to know each other. The next evening, we sat around the dinner table like we do every night and asked the girls to tell us about their day. When it came time for Campbell to talk, she wouldn't talk. Campbell, did you show everybody what was in your bag? No. Why not, Campbell? I didn't want to. What, did you run out of time? No. The next morning, Campbell and I walked into school together. We turned left and went down the long hallway to where Miss Shelley West stood greeting students, shaking their hands as they entered the classroom. Mrs. West looked surprised to see me, and I said, "It's okay, but Mrs. West, we want to tell you something. The reason Campbell wouldn't show you what was in her bag yesterday wasn't because she was too shy, but it was because there were 2 loud boys at her table, and they were making fun of Harry Potter. They didn't know that inside Campbell's bag was a Harry Potter item." Mrs. West, without missing a beat, got down on her knees and looked Campbell in the eye, and she said, "Campbell, my family and I love Harry Potter. And in fact, the boy that just walked out of the classroom 3 seconds ago, he was in my class last year, and he had come by this morning to show me the Harry Potter book that he had read this summer." Mrs. West put her arm around Campbell, and they walked into the classroom, and Campbell had the best year of her life. Why in the world do you do what you do? Because you can do something that parents can't do, and because of students like my middle daughter, Campbell. Spencer was excited to start pre-K. She had her brand new backpack and her brand new lunchbox and her brand new Adidas Velcro shoes. We walked into the school and we were met by Dee Risley and Kelly Fuquay, and we turned left and went down the hallway to the Lyme Lizards classroom where Miss Judith greeted us with that warm Southern hospitality. She took a picture of the family, and Spencer was ready to go until it was time for us to go. And she reached those fingers up and grabbed a hold of our clothes and squeezed with the strength of a little girl who was scared for her life. And you know the scene. Her lips began to quiver, her eyes began to fill, and as her parents, we lovingly stretched those fingers apart from her hands and pushed her away. And at the same time, a sweet, smiling school superintendent came walking around the room and grabbed Spencer's hand and said, "Come on, Spencer, let's go play." And the two of them sat beside each other in those little pre-K chairs, cracked open a can of Play-Doh, and they made art. 10 minutes later, Joy and I received a text message with a picture of the sweet, smiling school superintendent and a sweet, smiling Spencer. Why in the world do you do what you do? Because you can do something that parents can't do. And because of students like my youngest daughter, Spencer. 25 years ago, I was an overprogrammed, overscheduled, overinvolved high school student, and I sat for an Algebra 2 test, and I didn't know anything. I guessed my way through the test, and at the end of the test, on the bottom of the last page, I wrote a note to the teacher. Why did I write a note? Because when your teacher cares, it changes everything. Dear Mr. Morford, I'm sorry I did poorly on your test. It's not because you didn't teach the information. It's because I had too many other things on my plate to spend time studying. I hope that Mr. Morford would have mercy on me, that he would grade on the curve, but the next day I walked into class and Mr. Morford handed me my test, and on the front was a big red F. Now, obviously, math is not my strong suit, but I am smart enough to know Miss Carol Holland and Miss Patty Gilmer that there's no rounding up a 36%. There's no curve big enough to fix a 36%. But as I flipped through the pages of my test, I noticed that Mr. Morford had taken the time to write out the steps to solve each question that I missed, and there were a lot of them. On the last page, under my note, was a new note written in red that said, "Dear Garrett, life is a series of choices governed by priorities. Sincerely, Al Morford." Life is a series of choices governed by priorities. I can't tell you, friends, how many times over the last 25 years I have considered that note from my junior math teacher. Life is a series of choices governed by priorities. When I graduated from high school, when I went to college, when I met my wife Joy, when we started dating and then got married and started a family of our own, life is a series of choices governed by priorities. Friends, sometimes the best lessons aren't learned between the pages of a textbook or the confines of a curriculum. Friends, I've got another question that I'd like to ask you. Do you think for a moment that that moment made an impact? Do you think for a moment that 20 years later, that moment helped a father, a husband, an artist, a business owner, and his loving, beautiful wife have the courage to sell it all, to start fresh, to move to Gordon County? You bet it did. And what's the result? This is the result. This is a family. No, it's not perfect, but it's beautiful. So why in the world do you do what you do? I'll tell you why. Because you never know which moment, which word, which action, or which interaction will be the one moment that changes someone's life. And maybe, just maybe, those moments, those teachable moments, that collection of words and actions and interactions that you create and engineer and formulate down in the deepest depths of your heart and soul might just be sacred and inspired. And maybe, just maybe, friends, those moments, your moments, Calhoun City Schools, will be a shining light that leaves an everlasting impact, not just on the life of a child, but on the entire world forever.